Now we can hear you.
Can you all see me?
Yes, we can. And that camera will allow you to point the camera at Mark. Okay?
I am not finding it.
It's kind of a little.
It says main camera number 1, main camera number 2.
Hi. Yes,
Uh,
I'll pass those out.
we'll have to try.
But you can take one now that you're up
Try
there.
the other button. No, that muted the mic. Okay. I wish I had one.
Can I go ask that man to help me? Because
You can ask him. Don't forget to mute.
Yeah,
your
we're live.
microphone, though.
So,
Go ahead and mute your microphone now.
okay, do what?
Turn your microphone off.
Okay.
Thank you. Anytime you want to talk, remember to turn it back on. Sorry, Mark.
it's all right. My lawyer will call your lawyer.
Okay.
Welcome to CPSY200 Winter 2014, the latest and the greatest. The syllabus I'm handing out is also on Moodle for all 3 sections. There are 3 sections of this class. You are in the live interactive one. Actually, all of them are live and interactive, but this is being broadcast on Comcast 23 and Charter 9. So if anybody's looking for you, you can take the online section, in which you can take it from the security relative of your home. You know, NSA is NSA, right?
Right.
They're spying on Congress. Why do you think they don't know what's in your bank account? But anyway, I'll just pass these out. I may run out because there's more people than I expected. But hey, that's fine. This class was, as I'll point out, was designed for professionals, not only in the addictions field, but also related fields in human services. I've had nurses, cops, DEA agents, all kinds of folks who want to basically, who are paid to deal with this. Some of you are here from what I refer to as the civilians class last term, which is basically they have to deal with the issues, but they're not being paid to deal with it. And some of us felt that you needed to know as much as we do. But in the pros class, it is assumed that you are not in an active addiction because you are going to see things, we are going to discuss things that will be triggering. And as a pro, you're already supposed to be beyond that. So definitely do good self-care, but I'm not holding back or pulling punches or anything like that. Can I use you as a demonstration here? Just the book. Sure. There are 2 books. Addiction Treatment Theory and Practice, which is 14 years old. Not a whole lot has changed in treatment. The stuff that has changed will already be part of the course. I just use the book mostly because I haven't had time to write a better one. And there are better ones, and mostly what you're getting in the course, I believe, is an improvement on what's in here. So I'll talk about the deficits, and there are assigned readings in the syllabus, and I'll refer to them.
Excuse me.
Go for it.
How do I get the materials that you guys have?
Okay, it's on Moodle, if you have access to that. And I can email it to a staff person down there, and they can print it out for you. But it's on Moodle as well.
Okay. Thank you.
It's in the section before the first week. I could actually pull that up and show you if you wanted that.
That would be great.
Do you want to see that?
Yes.
Just where it is? Okay. The second book, one of the dilemmas that we have, and just in the interest of full disclosure, 90% of the addictions field are people in recovery, people who had problems. I'm part of the 10% that ain't. So in 12-step terms, I'm a normie, right? So my politics and my culture did not allow me to develop drug problems, except I did develop a type 2 diabetes eating disorder from dealing with the stress, so cheeseburger is drug, or actually it's potato chips. So that being said, the reason I have this book and the other books that are suggested in the list is because one of the things that we can't train for is street wisdom. And so for people who have never dealt with people who have been criminal convicts, operating on the shadow economy, this book, among others, has kind of a decent overview so that you can begin to conceive of what it's like on the illegal side of life and transfer the skill set, as well as people who were on the illegal side of life transferring the skill set into operating above ground, as it were. I don't entirely agree with some of his conclusions, but it's decent in terms of what it talks about. Let's see here. So, okay, Moodle. Yep. Okay. Oh, great. Where's the meta? Here's the meta. Okay. All right. So if you can see this screen down there in Cottage Grove, all right, and the rest of you as well, how far did the syllabi go? Everybody got one? Who doesn't? Okay. All right. So here is that document. Open. Thank you. That's okay. Just open it. Don't give me no back talk. Wow. Seriously? Okay. All right. So syllabus will look like this. This is the live stream link. And basically, here's how the class works. So there are 3 sections. We're on camera now. We're being recorded. At the end of the day, the crew will send me a YouTube link so you can watch this afterwards. And on Comcast 23 and Charter 9, it's going out live. But it won't be rebroadcast. So how you view it later is the YouTube links, which will go out the next day, be posted in a Word document in Moodle. If you're already online, you're seeing this now live, and you still have access to the YouTube links like everyone else. And Cottage Grove is the signal's going to Cottage Grove. So those 3 sections. I also have up here in just before the first week. different recovery frameworks. So, as an example, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous have name familiarity in this country, but they're not the only recovery frameworks available, neither are they the oldest. There are lots of others. And so being a normie and also having academic freedom, I basically publish those. And part of when you come to see me at my office, I'm technically the drug counselor. Since I'm a normie, I'm not wedded to one particular framework. I'm interested in the science and what works. And fortunately, the science is not just what we consider science in the West, but other places, and I'll be showing you that. So recovery frameworks and some other interesting things which I'll point out as we get to them. Yes?
Could you touch on like the Wellbriety?
Wellbriety, yes. The Wellbriety movement is probably the oldest indigenous framework in America, dating back to the 18th century. All right. Yes?
What does the C before the psychology abbreviation stand for?
Counseling psychology. So here's what the deal is. My degrees are in psychology, master's and 3/4 of a doctorate in public health. In psychology and in some psychology departments, notably the one at Lane Community College, there are some people who teach psychology as a subject but are not therapists. So they teach it as an academic subject. CPSY is for training therapists. Right? Because, I don't know if you're like me, but I took psychology because I wanted to know how the mind worked. Particularly, in the interest of self-disclosure. Yes, I've inhaled. To quote Jimi Hendrix, yes, I am experienced. Why does LSD work? I mean, that's how I got into this field. Why does LSD work? Because I had to talk people out of their bad acid trips, hold them while they were dope sick, dealing with them while they're delusional or whatever. And so how I got recruited in this field in the state is because I was into the neuroscience. Son of a doctor, so, my parents did a particular form of child abuse where they use big words and make you look them up in the dictionary. And then use medical terms and make you look that up in the medical dictionary. Before I was 10. So, I could read, really? Xanax, it can physically addict you in a week of using it, and if you go cold turkey, it'll kill you? This is legal? Yes.
Right.
Yes. So, in our field, especially with the changes that have just happened with DSM-5, we're not caring so much whether the drug is legal or not. You can still be strung out or addicted on it, and you still have to basically have the client manage their life. You do. And so trying to give you that kind of information in 11 weeks is doable. Fear not. All right, so originally this course, recombined from Drug 101, which was the state's basic training for drug counselors. It was a week-long residential. We did pharmacology. We had to read the physician's desk reference and talk about pharmaceutical drugs and how they worked in the body, basic anatomy and physiology. So a week-long residential course for treatment providers, because in the 80s, when this was happening, since most of the field, again, was 12-steppers, the 12-step framework, I'm not knocking it, but look, this is invented in 1939, before addiction treatment was even a science. So there are certain things that weren't part of the framework. So we had to move on with that, right? So Problem, treatment and or rehab is limited by resources, that is dollars, time needed for stages of change. Look, if somebody's been shooting dope for 20 years, do you really think that a 28-day spin dry is going to affect 20 years of experience? No. Okay? And if we were actually using the medical protocol, treatment would last like 6 months inpatient. And that only happens for certain people. Often those who've been incarcerated. A certain limited number of them. All right? So time needed for stages of change, experiences of the providers and agendas of practitioners, agencies, institutions, and society. So if, like education, the treatment system is being gutted and defunded, then only those with money will receive treatment from agencies that can still survive and be profitable. And we've been under those kind of situations for at least the 23 years that I've been in Oregon and the 40 years I've been in the field. Okay, so what about those others? So one of the things we looked at and what I continually upgrade this course for is to redesign for a liberation struggle. I try and stay away from the drug war nomenclature, because who is being made war against? So if addiction was the norm, what if addiction was the norm and being in recovery was illegal? And there are people that say, well, that's what's going on now. Well, right, okay. You'd still have to be effective, and it'd have to be on the down low, right? So that's kind of my orientation. So when people ask, well, are you in recovery? I'm not in recovery, I'm at war. Alcohol and drugs have been used as weapons against my people. This is wartime. You do not make yourself weak before the enemy. And it's not just my people, it's y'all, too. Because addiction is a major industry in the United States. Major part of the gross domestic product. I mean, it just is. So, how do you defend yourself? So, what if addiction prevention was a terrorist act? So, how would you proceed? So, I'm proceeding on the assumption you want to be effective regardless of the agency or entity you're working in or the community that you're in. Because I was just talking with one of our staff people who's got family back in Indiana, and if one of their family members is drinking 36 beers a day and thinks that's normal behavior, has had multiple Deweys, and, this person called Child Protective Services on their family member, and CPS just kind of laughed. Person has 3 Deweys, they've gotten a warning, they've been on house arrest, so you're not going to do anything. And so, they can't go back and deal with that person's family, so they need certain information. And so, as an example, what kind of infrastructure is there within, your particular state? So, whether or not you need to be effective, whether or not there's infrastructure to support you. So, part of this class has been redesigned to be able to help you do that anywhere, wherever you are. So you might have to ask detailed questions. Don't fear to do that. So even if there are hostile forces arrayed against you, and I'm just letting you know that there are, that's okay. All right, so the Addictive Behavior series, last term, Introduction to Addictive Behavior for lay people, civilians, as I say. CPSY, this one, Human Service Professionals of any stripe. And a third class, which strangely they never funded, but has been infused within this class because part of our ethical commitment as certified alcohol and drug counselors is we have to actually work against systemic discrimination and health disparities as part of our ethical code, which might mean transforming the addictive organizations we're a part of. So that's a covert operation. So, yes,
Do you have to take CPS 195 before you take this class?
no, no. All right, so your issues with addiction should be resolved. As I said before, the Oregon Certification Board historically did not prosecute you for having a medical marijuana card, but now has aligned with a national organization in banning addiction counselors with medical marijuana cards. So, word to the wise, et cetera, et cetera. Not asking you to do illegal behavior, but understand. Here's how I would do that workaround. People can access certain skill. And one of the problems that we have with our society, as a Native person and as an African person, drug technology has been taken out of the hands of healers, trained practitioners, and put in the hands of drug sellers. So once you got the profit motive in there and your primary idea is profit rather than the health of the people, what do you think is going to happen? Legalization doesn't change that. Doesn't. So you still have to have some skill with understanding the drug you may be doing. Now, dispensaries are coming here. I happen to like the Colorado model better than Oregon's because it's at least a step in the right direction in terms of testing everything, certifying how much is in, how much of what active constituent of the drug is in. But right now, it's crude here. Anyway, so other barriers to employment are like piercings, tats, body modifications, job killers. Probably want those to not be so obvious. Okay? You will see things that will trigger you. The expectation is you can handle it without relapsing, collapsing, freaking, or tweaking out. Or at least be able to talk about it before doing those things. Course evaluation, social reconnaissance paper, personal addiction inventory, biopsychosocial recon, and a research paper. So midterms and finals are because we are broadcasting and people taking tests is really boring television. Midterms and the final are take-home open book. Wait for it. All right. We work in a field. So unlike the civilian class, where people could actually turn in papers just before finals or just before grading, because they had issues, as pros, you are working in a field where you will be expected to generate paperwork that has life or death implications for folks on time. So, we work in the field. If paperwork's late, people lose their kids, go to jail, may even die. So, I'm instituting a protocol. Really, it's the old world protocol, so consider this old school. If you're on time, you're late. Get your stuff in early. You get advance notice, you get plenty of time to do it. Get your stuff in early. Early is the key to success. Okay, late papers will suffer a 10-point penalty for every day late past the first week they're due. 3 days late, obviously, no credit. Late tests like midterm, 10 points for every day late, 5 days late, no credit. Finals due by Thursday, March 20th at 5 o'clock. Finals received after that time suffer a 10-point deficit. No final will be accepted after 5 the next day. Sorry, y'all made me do it. Can't be loose. Okay? Exceptions will be made for documented major stressors or illness. All right, UAB. So, originally training for addiction counselors, now adapted. So, addictions. So, I've been in the field 40 years, and I date my time before technically there was a field. So, for example, my first paid job was in a day treatment center in South Central LA for what was labeled emotionally disturbed boys. Okay? Now, that was the label, they were emotionally disturbed. Now, they weren't actually emotionally disturbed. In the 21st century, here's what we would say. They were children of alcoholics who witnessed not only alcohol abuse, but domestic violence in the home and self-medicated the trauma with that with marijuana, and then came to school. So you're 9 years old, you're 10 years old, and are you going to sit still after witnessing domestic violence and all that and be stoned in the 4th grade? No. You're going to sit still? No. So the schools are going to give you a label and then ship you out to the friendly clinic, and then we get to deal with them. Now, technically, there was no drug treatment for 4th grade black kids in 1971 in South Central Los Angeles other than our clinic. And we didn't treat the drug piece because drug treatment didn't exist for kids then. That's why I date my time back to then, because noticing what's going on. How are you expected to make a sane adjustment to an insane situation with no help? That's what we're facing often in treatment. Particularly with, if you, for example, in this state have multi-generational meth producing and meth dealing families with people who have 4th or 5th grade educations. And counseling is based on the assumption that you at least have a high school education. That's what the language is. That reading level, right? You're in college, so this is technically grade 13 at least, grade 13 to 15. All right, so addiction stop being alcohol and drug, that's A and D, alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs, alcohol and other drug abuse, almost 30 years ago with HIV. Then, because like 80% of the HIV positive population in the United States got infected as adults under the influence, right? Because you watch TV, you see movies, how many times do you see people having sex clean and sober? So if they slip up on the condom use or whatever, or don't communicate with their sexual partners about their infection status, what do you think is going to happen? Same thing that happened in the 30s with syphilis, with the same predictable results, right? So in the addictions field, we had to get into people's sex lives. Heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, trisexual, whatever. All right? Now it's also addictions of various kinds, plus eating disorders, mental illness, gambling, cyber addictions, and also community organizer and advocate, too. So, oriented for people in the addictions field as well as within it. So I can't say this too much. You have to resolve your issues or at least know what the issues are. So part of our code of ethics, once you get certified, is also political advocacy to reduce health disparities and the impact of socio-structural inequities. I am speaking English. Can anybody give me an example of a socio-structural inequity? Yes, hard for poor people to afford health care and healthcare costs. So the actual solution would be, hey, single payer. You're a citizen, you're covered. no matter what happens. This covers homeless people, houseless people. It also covers vets who have been dishonorably discharged as a result of the substance abuse problem they got as a result of their combat experience. And they can't get treatment if they got dishonorably discharged. This covers them. Single payer. ACA doesn't address that. Other socio-structural inequities include what we'll be talking about later is the school-to-prison pipeline, as well as the prison industrial complex, as well as the new Jim Crow, as well as the Nicole number, as well as yes.
I have Writing 121 with John Williams.
Uh-huh.
And the first book we're reading, Uncle Tom's Children,
Good.
talks about Jim Crow.
Uh-huh.
And unless you don't read the introduction to that book, you really don't know what Jim Crow is.
Okay.
It's a system, right? It's a
Yes.
system that the African Americans had to live by.
Yes.
Okay.
But in terms of the context of the new Jim Crow, what that means is if you get busted for pot and you're black, and black people use pot at slightly less than whites, but they get busted 3 or 4 times as much and get sent to prison, where whites get treatment. That's a social inequity. And it's a medical problem. So if you get a pot beef, or it's a felony, or it's a felony in the state that you're in, you can't work once you get out. You are barred from employment. You are barred from being on food stamps. You are barred from all kinds of things, which means unless you have a rich uncle or aunt, you can't work in the legal economy, and it almost gets you sent back to prison, where the United States is the largest imprisoner of its citizens on the planet, even more than Russia. You are barred from employment because you have to check the box, have you ever been convicted of a felony or whatever? Federal employment, local employment, state employment, do you have a criminal record? Even if it's only pot. Only pot. Okay? So that is disproportionately affecting black people, but it also affects other folks too, with criminal records. Yes?
I learned a statistic, I don't know, yesterday or this morning, that said 40% of black people or black males are jailed before they're 23, and then Hispanics was 38%.
Yes.
And whites was 30. I thought that was crazy.
Well,
When you think
yes.
about, I mean, that's a lot of people.
So one of the ways we look at that in terms of dealing with our kind of political advocacy. Politics is it's a science of power. Who has it, who doesn't, who has less, who has more, how do you, when you have less power structurally, how do you get more empowered? Who do you use as an ally? Well, one of the first things you have to do is basically be clean and sober, or at least non-addictive, right? So in an African-American framework, addiction is slavery. And the reason we say addiction is slavery is that, like slavery, slavery was protected. Slavery was about the economics. It was about money. And people basically preserved it because they made money from it. They made money from people being in prison. All kinds of corruption within the prison system to keep people incarcerated. A whole apparatus keeping that in place, just like slavery, just like the Jim Crow system. So that's why people are making that point about, okay, this is basically, the prison industrial complex is like slavery, because they are literally slaves, essentially. Because you can be in prison for a lot of different reasons. So, addiction is slavery, and I'm like Harriet Tubman. I have freed 1,000 slaves, and I could have freed more if only they knew they were slaves. Yes, so a little black history here in advance of February. Harriet Tubman is known for the Underground Railroad, right? Underground Railroad, she freed 350 slaves in all her time in the Underground Railroad. So she's saying 1,000 slaves. Is her math off? Well, no. She was the military commander of a battle called the Combahee River Action, where she handpicked the Union Army colonel and majors that piloted gunboats that went up the Combahee River in South Carolina that freed 700 slaves in 3 days. Made the papers in New York and Boston. So that's how we know it's like historically documented. And the slaves wouldn't get on the boats because they thought it was the Confederates until she got started on the prow and started singing to them, and oh, it's Harriet. 700 slaves. That's why she's nicknamed the General. Right? But people don't know that because your history books, what, a black woman general? Okay? So, often people don't know that they're strung out, that they're slaves to whatever drug that they're on or whatever process they're on. You have to hip them to the fact that they are enslaved and they have to want to be free. And there's a structure keeping them unaware of that. So I actually once Googled addiction to slavery in Google image, and I got this. So this is in the hood somewhere, I think back east.
What is it on?
It's a billboard. Black hand, full of pills. There's a needle in there. Addiction to slavery.
Couldn't see what was in the hand.
Yeah.
With my glasses on.
The following image is going to be triggering. If you used if you were an injectable drug user. So, slavery profited from human misery. It was legal. Slave was property. And here's why I make this point over and over. The idea is that if I was a slave owner, I could buy a woman, rape her, get her pregnant, sell her kid at a profit and not feel anything about it. That's the reality of slavery. People are property. You transfer that to a corporation, and of course they can send your logging jobs to Indonesia. What do you think they're going to do? Pay you $20 an hour or pay an Indonesian $2 a day? Bingo. Do you think they have loyalty to you? You're replaceable. That's the value that was established in capitalism under slavery and is today. You think you're not replaceable? Okay, if Weyerhaeuser or Bohemia or whatever, you're on a shift and your foreman is stringing you out on methamphetamine to make the quota, I'm not making this up. With the full knowledge of the board, and your corporation is one of the 10 drug-free workplaces in Oregon. Really? So I'm just saying. Okay, you getting strung out, addiction to slavery. How do you get out of that if it's in your workplace? Okay, that's one of the things that we've had to deal with in this field, in this state, and not just in this field, and not just in this state either. Right? So, capitalism plus dope equals genocide. This is from the Black Panthers in New York City. New York City was one of the places where there was a free heroin detox program for easily since the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. If you watch The Godfather, the first one, where he basically talks about, they asked him, what are we going to do with all this heroin? And he says, we'll sell it to the niggers. That's a quote, right? You saw that movie, right? That's a reality. That's not Hollywood. The mafia was allowed to flood black communities with heroin with the full knowledge of both the federal government and the New York Police Department. There was no treatment allowed, and they incarcerated folks. Kickbacks to the cops, and the FBI let the mafia do that. Okay? So, against that tide, Black Panthers, us organization, other people had free heroin detox programs that got not only black people off of drugs, but also white addicts as well, for free. They were closed down by the cops. Why would you close down a free heroin detox program?
You're losing money.
Interrupts methadone sales.
Anyway, so when we say addiction is slavery, I mean, this is just one example of how certain things are put in place, and you don't necessarily question them, right? So whether people see themselves as slaves or not, some people don't get access to treatment the same way others do. So some people's addictions are treated as criminal problems instead of medical problems. So should a cocaine addict from the South Hills of Eugene be treated differently than a meth addict from Springfield? No, they shouldn't be medically, but they aren't treated the same in the system. That's part of the inequities that we're dealing with in treatment. Okay? So we're part of the medical community, so we should be applying the science rather than our personal prejudice as a value. We should be aware of our personal prejudices and their impact upon our applying the science. I have to treat skinheads, which is fine. I just let them know up front, look, I'm not scared of you, I'm just afraid that you're not going to believe what I say because of my excellent suntan. But we still have to deal with, your problem, right? So, all right, so in complex, our concept of addiction, so as part of our medical community, we should refer to the science first as far as it goes and what works, whatever works, particularly if it works better than the current science. Bear in mind, our Western medical science is younger than the United States, and our concept of addiction as a medical problem is younger than I am. I'm pushing 60. Yeah, I know. Good black don't crack. So, complex urban civilizations with sophisticated drug technologies older than Western civilization have had comprehensive prevention, treatment, and relapse prevention systems, and we'll be getting some of those as far as our focus in the first couple of weeks. So, understanding this, just to give you a bit of history. Western medicine began in the 19th century, 1865, with Semmelweis and Lister. So if you've ever used the product Listerine, that's why it's called that. What does it do? Kills germs. Before 1865, Western medicine did not have a germ theory. Okay? So that's how old the germ theory is, 149 years. Think about what that would mean. So here's what would happen then. Doctors were the only people, if a woman decided to have, so women have been having babies for 250,000 years as humans, right? So in cities, many women had their babies at home because they couldn't afford to go to hospitals, right? If they do go to a hospital, they're seen by a male doctor as opposed to a female midwife. And the male doctors would operate on cadavers to learn anatomy, get blood on their hands, and then attend a birth without having washed their hands as a routine practice. Okay? Because no germ theory, right? The body's dead. The corpse is dead, right? So what? And births are bloody. Blood, hey, no problem, right? So naturally, those women got infected and often died of septicemia. So one of these docs noticed that, well, in births attended by midwives, where the women washed their hands with hot soap and water, the septicemia rate was less than 10%. And he shared this with his colleagues, and they said, well, he said, maybe something is, there's a infective agent in the corpses that we're working on. Oh, no, you're crazy. So he infected himself to prove that he was right. Infection killed him. That's why they started sterilizing. Oh, well, maybe there's germs, right? Joseph Lister, your milk, you don't have raw milk, right? It is what? Pasteurized. Louis Pasteur, Joseph Lister. That's the idea, right? Now, okay, you see in the syllabus H1N1 protocols. Little kid just died from flu. Okay, medical science. Look, flu, there's a hemorrhagic flu still out there, like Ebola. Okay? There are lots of indigenous populations like the Hawaiians that got killed off by flu and cold and measles, stuff that doesn't kill lots of people now, right? So people can die from flu. So germ theory, all right? There are other things besides germ theory that are a part of Western civilization and Western medicine. But so our current view of addiction as a disease is 58 years old. After centuries of seeing it as a sin. So 1956. Neurotransmitter theory. How do drugs work in the body, in the brain? 1971. Marijuana ligand. Why does pot get you stoned, and how many different constituents in it get you stoned? 1991. Okay, so our science is younger than this country, and it's changing. We're learning new stuff at least monthly, all right? So my point being, in many cultures who had drug technologies before Western civilization, they've forgotten more about prevention and treatment and addiction than we know now. And one of the things that's clear is that prohibition by itself is very poor drug policy. Making something illegal simply creates an underground economy. And you don't really address the problem. But blanket legalization doesn't necessarily solve the problem either. Okay? We have to pretend we know it all. So as a practitioner, you'll have to balance what is known with what is unknown and proceed. So as an example, the selling of attention deficit disorder. Anybody got a diagnosis like that? Okay. So one of the things that happened after World War II was the influence of what we call big pharma. So this particular doctor, Keith Connors, he led the fight to legitimize attention deficit disorder. Severely hyperactive and impulsive children, once shunned as bad seeds, are now recognized as having a real neurological problem. Doctors and parents largely accepted drugs like Adderall and Concerta to temper the traits of classic ADHD, helping youngsters succeed in school and beyond. So prescription, that's RX, prescription stimulant sales have rocketed 5 times plus since 2002 and 2012 in a 10-year period. So if you understand that Adderall is pharmaceutical methamphetamine.
Isn't it just amphetamine?
No,
Where
it's methamphetamine. Lower dose than your street dose, usually. But he didn't feel triumphant because he noted that data from CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, show the diagnosis had been made in 15% of high school age children. The number of children on medication for the disorder soared to 3.5 million from 600,000 in 1990. Said the numbers make it look like an epidemic, and it's not. So this is being driven by the pharmaceutical company. I'm not saying that there isn't a neurological condition. There is. But whether the solution is a drug, take, for example, these ads. So you look at the image in the ads. So understand that what we know, for example, from the year 2000 statistics around alcohol advertising in this country. So the government spent $1 billion on treatment and prevention that year in 2000. The alcohol industry spent $10 billion in advertising for the US market alone, and that's for alcohol and tobacco. Pharmaceuticals is more, right? So if you look at this ad up and right? In the management of ADHD, reveal his potential. So here's a student on one side and an athlete on the other. Adderall XR improves academic performance. That is, objective measures of academic performance improve significantly. They don't tell you what those are, nor do they lead you to the study. Right? For the treatment of ADHD, a typical school day, forgets homework, keeps interrupting teacher, late homework. These point to your ask your child's doctor about Concerta, and then starts Concerta, pays attention during class, market improvement. Yeah. Today I got a good mark and made a new friend. What a great day. And then, of course, this one where the monster, the child underneath the monster is revealed through the magic of pharmaceuticals. So understand U.S. corporate law. They cannot spend money unless it generates a profit. All right? So all I'm saying here is these are legal drugs. We've got to deal with the fact, I have to deal with the fact that many clients were treated with ADHD drugs, amphetamine class drugs. Once they aged out, they felt the need to normalize using street methamphetamine.
And they're still.
All right, and so they're also targeting adults too with these particular drugs. All right, all that being said, the American Psychological Association's DSM-5, that is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the 5th version. So the link is, I basically just Googled at random an article about DSM-5 because we'll be quoting from DSM-5 later. I just want you to know what the science says about this. This is what we're about, right? According to the APA, publisher of DSM-5, the major change with substance abuse and alcohol abuse and dependence disorders has been the removal of the distinction between abuse and dependence. Now, why I'm explaining this is DSM-4R, because it was in revision, made a distinction between abuse and dependence. Okay? So abuse was a behavior that fell short of dependence, which is addiction. Okay? You could abuse without being addicted in that framework. Now they're basically saying, okay, we're throwing out abuse and basically saying, look, there's a substance use disorder. So we're not caring so much whether your drug is legal or not. And this is conforming with case law and some of the science. Because here's the reality, for example, with the current medical marijuana hoo-ha. Marijuana was a legal drug. in the US pharmacopoeia. All the big pharma houses that existed today had medical marijuana preparations prior to 1938. All of them. And I do mean all of them. I've done the research. All of them. So what made it illegal? Well, not a public health problem. Something else. Well, politics too. Yes.
It was associated with African American, right? It was with like jazz players. That's what I heard. That's why.
Where'd you hear that from?
I don't know. Some like documentary. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I've said it too. But here's where that came from. I'm at a prevention conference, state prevention conference. The then Attorney General says, when I was in high school, the only people that used drugs were jazz musicians and people south of the border. Ha 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 ha. Except, you know, the black people and the Mexicans are not laughing. And maybe that was true for Mr. Frohnmeyer in Medford in the 1950s. But I'm kind of doubting that only black people and Mexicans in Medford are using drugs in the 1950s. I'm kind of doubting that. A little bit of denial there. And then a big-time drug researcher, 6 months later, used the same joke. Huh. And he's more lefty, so I'm thinking, okay, there's an impression here. So I do some research. The top drug cop, Harry Jacob Anslinger, in 1938 testified before Congress that, and I quote, coloreds with big lips induce white women to have sex with them using jazz music and marijuana. Okay. And this caused Congress to pass the Marijuana Tax Act the next year, which didn't make marijuana illegal, but it simply taxed all the products that were made with it, making them more expensive, and then a bunch of then they basically associated again marijuana with blacks and Mexicans, right? So no public health problem, unless interracial sex is okay, whatever. And how many people are we talking about here? Right, anyway. So racism as drug policy. So part of the piece then is, all right, there's no public health problem. Why is this illegal? Why is peyote scheduled with heroin? Okay? How many people do you know knock over a 7-Eleven or a bank for their peyote habit? Never been a public health problem with peyote. Why is it illegal? Because it's the sacrament of Indians. And before 1978, it was illegal for Indians to practice their religion.
Before 19 what?
1978. So part of the piece then is looking at, all right, when we've now moved into the 21st century, so the distinction between abuse and dependence. They're saying also, so our drug laws are not necessarily based on pharmacology or the science, but politics. But we have to be, as part of the medical community, dealing with the science. So the chapter basically it moves gambling disorder into substance abuse and behavioral disorders because it reflects the increasing and consistent evidence that some behaviors such as gambling activate the brain reward system with effects similar to those of drugs of abuse, and that gambling disorder symptoms resemble substance use disorders to a certain extent. Criteria provided for substance abuse disorder with criteria for intoxication, withdrawal, some substance medication-induced disorders. So this is an interesting piece. What it's acknowledging then, and this is what I meant by it doesn't matter whether the drug is legal or not, prescribed for you or not, it produces effects. Okay? You can be strung out on physically addicted to a legal pharmaceutical. that as a side effect might be doing neurological damage to you and causing mental health effects as part of the course of therapy. And we have to be trained to deal with that and understand how that works. You scared yet? Okay. All right. Good. All right. Okay, so understand you can be, let me break it down simply. I explained this to a client yesterday. This client has a partner who has a medical condition that's painful, so she's been medicating that with street-sourced pharmaceutical opiates. He said, I don't know what it is, just a white pill, a pink pill, a blue pill. I don't know what they are. So I said, what? Vikes, Oxys, what? Well, I don't know. But then she was getting them from friends, then that supply ran out, so now she's been smoking tar.
Oh.
Tar?
Yeah, for pain relief, for a medical condition. Oh, the medical condition is painful. So he and she have been having arguments about whether she's a junkie or not. Well, they love each other, and they've partied together and had a rockin' New Year's and all that. But okay, here's the piece with that. If she or he were under a doctor's care for that painful medical condition, they are a medical patient. If you are, and legal pharmaceuticals, they are a medical patient. And we have to understand how and help them to understand what's happening with them. But if they're using street heroin, they are a junkie. And yes, maybe that's a pejorative term, or opiate addict, if you like that, if you're dependent on opiates or you're abusing, you have a substance use disorder, as our new nomenclature is. You have to understand what the difference is. Maybe it sounds disingenuous or dishonest, but look, you're under a doctor's care on one hand. And the reason that doctors don't do this is because a doctor that treats themselves has a fool for a patient. That's why the concept of self-medication is so crucial. No, you don't medicate yourself. You have somebody independently do that, determine what.
So this lady didn't have a doctor, is that the deal?
This person is insured, even. But they're part of a, shall we say, they're 20-somethings, and they're part of a youth subculture that, part of their rebellion is, I don't want to go to a doctor even though, and yada, yada. All right? So we have to deal with, these complexities with clients. All right? 2 major changes to the new criteria for substance use disorder. Recurrent legal problems has been deleted. Okay? Doesn't matter if of course you're going to have recurrent legal problems, but we're not going to trip about that. New criterion has been added, craving or a strong desire to use a substance. And this figures in what happens later. So, threshold for substance use disorder, 2 or more criteria. Cannabis withdrawal is new, as well as caffeine withdrawal. Of note, tobacco use disorders in there, same order as those for other substance use disorders, and used to have a tobacco abuse disorder. And severity, so 2 to 3 criteria, mild, 4 to 5, moderate, 6 or more, severe. And we'll talk about the criteria way later. So last, and I thought this is critical for you to understand in terms of when somebody said, so one of the things I was talking about with that client the other day was, okay, if they're not a junkie, can they stop using for a week? Yes or no? Well, they're on the pipe, so I'm going to assume no. But try and not use for a week. They can't do that. You say they've been using every day for the last 30. They're strung. I'm sorry. They're strung. Smoking is just like shooting. More palatable route of administration, but it's just as addicting. Right? So, early remission from a DSM-5 substance use disorder is defined as at least 3, but no less than 12. So basically, is it a problem? Okay, it's not a problem if you cannot use for 3 months. Better that you cannot use for a year. But first get to that 3 months. And then that year. Right? They're saying that straight out. And sustained remission is defined as at least 12 months without certain criteria except for craving, because craving criteria, they're acknowledging that, look, craving is going to be part of your recovery experience. But if that's the only thing you have and you don't use, great. But you're going to be dealing with that. So that's actually more realistic. Because I'm usually skeptical of APA. But I have to follow the criteria as well as you do. So, also on the Moodle site, in addition to the slides that we'll be using every day, as I used a couple of SAMHSA slides from a presentation that was given at one of my work studies found on the website. And this is part of that. So BH means behavioral health problems. So they're saying not only mental illness, but also substance use disorders, SUDs, okay? They're basically saying that not only are people addicted or mentally ill, but as part of what's happening while being addicted or mentally ill, they have physical health problems, which make their underlying condition worse. And you have to take that into account because we're part of the medical community. Because sometimes your diabetologist might not know that you're a junkie. Might not even ask the question, but we have to ask the question. So, half of Americans will meet criteria for mental illness at some point in their lives. 7% of the adult population, 34 million people, have comorbid. That means they both have mental health conditions and physical conditions within a given year. The term that we use, that we still have, dual diagnosis. That means you have a mental illness and an addiction simultaneously. Comorbid. Morbid not means death, it means sickness. So both things happening at the same time. So here was an interesting thing from that presentation from the federal level. So what Americans know? Most know or are taught, we'll do a straw poll here. How many of you know basic first aid or CPR? Well, that's true so far. How about the universal signs for choking, facial expression of physical pain, basic terminology to recognize blood or other physical symptoms of illness and injury? Okay. Basic nutrition and physical health care requirements, and where to go or who to call in an emergency. Okay, great. So far, so good. Most do not know or are not taught signs of suicide, addiction, or mental illness, or what to do about them, or how to find help for self or others. Do you find that to be true? Okay. Relationship of behavioral health to individual or community health or to healthcare costs. And relationship of early childhood trauma to adult physical and mental substance abuse disorders. Most people don't know that. Right. Right. So you know if you're a pro, but how many pros are there? So, for example, physical health, what it takes: nutrition, exercise, rest, good genes, and then reduce risk, so hand washing, because we know about the germ theory, covering your cough, protecting from food-borne illnesses. Like, okay, don't go to a salad bar without a sneeze guard. Okay, cook your chicken well, etc., etc. Getting immunizations, taking universal precautions, avoiding unprotected sex, universal precautions. Assume everybody's infected and protect yourself. All right? So that's for physical health. For behavioral health, what it takes, understanding and managing emotions, managing stress, having positive social relationships, and hope or spirituality. Remember, it's the government. They can't say you need to be doing this or that religion. So having hope for your particular situation or spirituality or some other framework to help you be able to function more positively. And then reducing risks, recognizing trauma, chronic stress, especially in childhood, a non-supportive or destructive relationships, uninformed parenting, no or limited skills in terms of recognizing those other things. So with physical health, recognizing the signs, temperature, cough, fever, pain, avoiding behaviors that increase risks, knowing when and how to get help, early detection, testing, screening, stop the bleeding and pain, save life first. Behavioral health, recognizing the signs, suicidal thinking, depression and anxiety, post-traumatic stress, substance abuse, underage drinking or inappropriate amounts in adults. So, for example, when is it a problem? So, as is part of my job, when students come to me and they, for whatever reason, feel that it's normal behavior to drink a fifth of vodka a day, because that's where their family did it, or it's normal behavior to drink 30 cans of beer a day, when did that become normal and why? And who promoted that idea? So knowing when and how to get help. So early detection, screening, brief interventions, stopping emotional pain, keeping safe for individuals and also for the community. So the reason I started here is that part of what is the joy within our field is that it is actually relatively easy once you recognize a problem to then begin to instruct people on the steps to take to begin to get out of the hole. That's relatively easy. I didn't say necessarily. It's simple, but not necessarily easy. Because they still have to do the work and you still have to guide them without being attached to whether they do it or not. So let's see, 5 minutes. Let me do assignments. Okay. Let's do this so I can get out of the way. All right? All right, so first assignment. If you did this before in 195, you're to go deeper. But if you haven't done it, so social recon, this is out of public health. It's the idea that you're going out and you're scanning what the environment is with an idea to first just look at it and then see its impact. So it could be going out into society and recording what you see with an idea to assess the public health environment. So it's the environment. So, for example, need to become aware of the environment that creates or influences you so that you can make others aware of how their environment has influenced them. So, for example, a person who thinks that responsible drinking comes from the beer companies who are organized to do what? Sell beer. All right? So responsible drinking should mean that as an adult, you should be able to physically make the decision. But physically, you can't make the decision past legally drunk. So everybody knows how much legally drunk is, right? How much? 0.08. How much is that for you? Well, you can find out. It is discoverable, right? It's a strict dose to weight relationship. Okay? Just like a bottle of aspirin, right? But people don't know that. So, when, for example, you go by the university and you go to, when you pull money out of an ATM, what denominations? 20s, okay? So there's a store by the university where the ATM spits out 10s. And why do you think that is? Because a case of beer is $9.99. You think that's an accident? No. That would be discovered in a social recon.
Wouldn't they want to give 20s?
Okay, so that's an example of how social recon works, right? So you need to understand the ways of the enemy. So for example, the 4 Ps: product, place, price, promotion. See how the 4 Ps could work in a restaurant, a bar, festival, a frat or sorority party. It could involve answering, for example, how does somebody who's houseless, no health insurance, take care of basic hygiene? Be creative. Huh? This is also in the syllabus too.
When is it due?
Let's see, I believe it's in 2 weeks.
How long is it supposed to be?
2 pages, it's spelled out.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay, 23? Week 3, yeah. No, that's the old slide, thanks. I didn't change that, my bad. It can be double spaced, yes. Yeah, sure. All right, so that first assignment, and we'll go more into that later. So another one, personal addiction inventory. All right, so that consists of, basically, it'll take you 4 weeks to do it. So 1 week food mood diary, or if you've done this before, from the last class, 80% live food diet for a week.
What?
I'm not talking about live squirrels. 80% live food diet.
What's that, like cow, chicken? Is that what it's talking about?
Vegetables, yeah. See what that does to you. That means you have to make it at home or access it somewhere. 80% live food. Obviously, you could have a hamburger, right? But see what eating an 80% live food diet does for you for a week. Especially if your diet is fast food. See what that does to you psychologically. What? Because fast food induces addiction to the drugs of sugar and salt, which are psychoactive.
Okay.
Okay? Look, we're not getting meth addicts clean and sober than having them strung out on chocolate milk, yo. Come on. And you can't prescribe something for somebody that you haven't done and confronted. Because look, if you can't give up fast food for a week, how do you expect somebody to get off meth that you're guiding?
Right.
I mean, I'm just being real here.
So you're just saying, be a week on no fast food?
Yeah, well, we'll get into that more. Okay. So the music is cueing to say we're leaving. So, but that doesn't mean I can still answer your question. Go ahead. Yes. Yeah, we'll explain this, the PAI, the personal addiction inventory later.